Good morning again. Odin Rathnam here, defining virtuosity. Our next video today will be on the 32nd etude of Wohlfahrt, Opus 45, Book 2. This is an interesting and difficult etude in that there's a lot of music in it. And what I mean by that is a lot of opportunity to express different phrasings and sounds. However, I begin it very simply with students, just trying to get them to play it in rhythm and in tune with the conditions for playing it more musically later. And the main condition is freedom, that everything works. It's somewhat march-like, perhaps not as much as 33. And I've made a couple of alterings to some bowings that I'll explain as we move along in the etude. It starts with triplet, no, not triplet, but 3 eighth note upbeats to the common time etude, and it's just a scale up to a C from an open G. Right? I train the students to really work on the control of the bow here, right? That we're not uncomfortable close to the frog of the bow and can draw détachés there. You're primarily in the small triangle shape, according to the Galamian book. However, there's much more wrists and fingers combined with that, rather than trying to do those little motions with the big muscle of the shoulder, which is not comfortable. So we try to teach them to use the fingers, wrist, and a little bit of elbow. So position the height of the elbow and the degree of backing up of the arm to allow the bow to be at right angles with the string for the upbeat. So that said, the tempo can be moderate. I've set my metronome typically for this at about 120. And you can hear it in the background. Let's just examine what our note values are. In this pattern, we have half notes, quarter notes, and we end with a whole note. What I try to teach the students initially is to control the sound in the context of time so that things are even. That whatever the dynamic is for the half notes, it's also that for the quarters and the eighths and the whole note. So if we're sensitive to that, we're going to discover that we will have different bow speeds. If we want to be arbitrary about things, and if, let's say, we were using half bows for the, or a little more than half bows for the half notes, if we then wanted to hold a whole note, the bow speed would become twice as slow. Therefore, the sounding point will move closer to the bridge. So what I try to immediately sensitize students to is the notion of, let's say you had a 1 count. 1, yeah? 1, 2, 1, 2. If that would have 1 bow speed, 1 sounding point. 1, 2, stop, and going in the opposite direction. 1, 2, stop, would have a slower sounding point, a slightly closer sounding point to the bridge. A 4 count would be closer to 3, 4, closer still to the bridge because the bow speed is that much slower. By managing this and controlling with our ears, we can keep the tone more even. That's just a means to an end. So the student could be trained to use whole bows and half bows in the beginning for these strokes. If we use a whole bow for these half notes, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2. Now we have quarter notes. We use half as much bow. but somehow we have to migrate towards the tip to accommodate the whole note that's coming up. This can be accomplished by using a little bit more bow on the down bows than on the up bows, just as a principle. The first alteration to the printed music happens at the end of the first line. Measure 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And at bar 16, I hook in the C to the first of the upbeat eighth notes and do the reverse bowing with a catch, so that we can make sound the same as that in both parts of the bow. Good training for the young artist right away. However, if you do the printed bowing, you can lift on the tied note. Lift, lift, and catch the ensuing up bow. That's how it's printed in the music, and I do have the students practice that as well. Moving along, as we move through the study, there are longer groupings of quarter notes. In the beginning, practice the martelé. In performance, more lyrical. So again, from the beginning, everything is caught in the beginning. Catch, out, in, out, in. Out, in, out, in. And for review to the other videos, correlation is important here. Finger first, bow next, sound last. Preparation, preparation, so that all of the sounds that you make are releases. And as much as possible, I try to make sure that the left hand is in a position to vibrate. But the student can take these exercises and build virtues up in groupings. First, making sure that the taps are good. Then vibrating. Then so that the vibrato is easy to execute, and we've thought about the conditions from the vibrato from my video, The Gypsy Next Door, and conditions for developing a true impulse vibrato. If on the impacts, the fingers aren't free behind the first joint, okay? And if the first knuckle is pushed into the neck there, it's a no-no. The vibrato won't work. Also, if the shoulders is squeezing up, that will also lock the vibrato. So you want to make sure when you're doing your preliminary exercises that the fiddle is basically balanced in the thumb and the collarbone. That you could almost, if you wanted to, still vibrate without your chin giving any counter pressure while you're playing. That will release a lot of tension. Moving on from G major. We now come to a series of whole notes where I teach a crescendo to my students, and I really try to make sure that as they build the sound up, they don't have a correlation between their tension and the crescendo that's being created, that it's done strictly using technique. So we have a 4 count at 1 sounding point for here. Now a little closer. Now 3rd sounding point. Closer. Same, relax the vibrato. Same. here, if you look at these slurred eighth note passages and think of Beethoven and great composers and ornaments. Ornaments are devices to make something more beautiful. I don't like to be flippant about the eighth notes. We don't want to do, let's sing. Now the same thing in half notes. This is dominant. This is now returning to C major, less. Then maybe a little more. Same hook bowing as bar 8, and I can't remember what the subsequent bar was, but starting again, catching the string, out, in, out, in. Use your bow direction and train the arm that way. This is a dominant seventh climbing up to a high D. I like to teach the students to take a little time here. So we get a sense of a true recapitulation in the subsequent bar. And we hold this, I'll do one more time from the hooked bowing. And again, I will reiterate what I said earlier. Changes, crescendos, diminuendos, accelerandos, ritardandos. These are places where typically the students and artists that I see all the time tighten up. It's as though their intention is parallel to their tension. And I don't think it's necessary. I think that we have to root that out and constantly work towards making our intention separate from tension. So when you practice this crescendo, I would spend time thinking about just the vibrato with no crescendo. And then as an exercise, use what I call oblique correlation between the left hand and the right hand. That's when one hand remains the same and the other changes. What we're going to do is create increased resistance in the bow and increased power in the bow, but we're going to consciously leave the left hand free. And that creates less muscularity. For me, anyway, it's a way to survive as a 54-year-old violinist. Going on, recapitulation. Now it brings it up a fourth. I think it should have more power. Then we can relax a little bit. And again, here, make a legato crossing before you grab the note. last three measures to my final alteration of the original bowings. That is, I slur the next two quarters so that we will end the piece down bow. And there you have it. Franz Wohlfahrt Etude number 32, the Allegro. I hope this helps you in your study. Remember to begin by practicing with stops. Stop, stop, all the way through, everything, for clarity. Next note, next note. If you feel that something isn't centered or isn't in tune, go back. And between all catches, the arm is completely relaxed and hanging. If you're not fanatical about that, the tendency will be to press down as you make sounds, which is the opposite of catch and release. It's got to be a release. If you follow these rules and work through it slowly, everything can be defined this way. Catch, slurs, catch the first note, prepare. When you get rid of that faster, what it does is it establishes the sound instantly. We don't perform with that degree of catch on everything. In fact, we get rid of most of the clicks, except where we want them deliberately. But this forces us to make sure that the bow and the left hand are ready before any sound is made. Good luck with this. If you enjoyed it and it helped you, comment, like my page, subscribe, and share with others. I would love to see more of you. And until next, have a great day.